Paris Saint-Germain lost £265 million. Neymar and Mbappe, two of the biggest stars on the planet, and PSG still lost that much money on just their transfers alone. One bad choice. That's all it takes. No cheating, no crime, just one signature. You'd think soccer's biggest mistakes happen on the field. A missed penalty, a red card, but those only cost one game. Let's start with the most expensive kind of mistake there is, paying too much for the wrong player at the wrong time. In January 2018, Barcelona signed Philippe Coutinho from Liverpool. The fee with add-ons could rise as high as £142 million. At the time, it was one of the largest transfers in football history. Barcelona weren't reckless. Their scouting department was considered one of the best in the world, but Coutinho never fit the system. 3 years later, they sold him to Aston Villa for a fraction of the price. The club didn't just lose money, they lost the flexibility that money could have bought them, a new striker, a rebuilt midfield. Chelsea did something similar in 2021, £97.5 million for Romelu Lukaku, re-signed from Inter Milan. On paper, it looked safe. He'd scored goals everywhere he'd played, but within a year, he was gone again, loaned out, then sold at a steep loss. Same story, different club, different name, same pattern. Manchester City spent £100 million on Jack Grealish in 2021. He helped them win trophies, but by most footballing metrics, his individual output never matched the fee. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. That £100 million wasn't just a transfer fee. It was £100 million that could not be spent anywhere else. Every pound tied up in one decision is a pound that isn't available for the next one. A striker that got away, a defender someone else signed instead, a trophy that ended up in a different city. But overpaying isn't even the most damaging mistake in football. There's one that's worse, and it's the opposite. In 2014, Chelsea sold a 23-year-old midfielder to Wolfsburg for £18 million. His name was Kevin De Bruyne. Chelsea's coaching staff didn't think he fit their system. 2 years later, Manchester City signed him for over $50 million. Within a few seasons, he was arguably the best midfielder on the planet. Chelsea didn't lose £18 million. They lost a trophy case. Nobody can put an exact number on what that decision actually cost because you can't calculate the value of championships that never happened. This is the part scouts don't like to admit. Overpaying for the wrong player is a mistake you can see. It's on the balance sheet immediately. Undervaluing the right player is a mistake that doesn't show up for years. Sometimes it doesn't show up at all until a rival lifts the trophy you should have won, and by then everyone's already forgotten it was ever your decision to make. And then there's the mistake that isn't about any single player at all. This is the one that should scare you the most. Leeds United, early 2000s. The club borrowed heavily against the assumption that they'd keep qualifying for the Champions League year after year. New signings, higher wages, a stadium expansion, all financed on the bet that success was guaranteed. In 2002, that bet collapsed. Leeds missed out on qualification. The debt didn't disappear. Players were sold off one by one just to keep the lights on. Within a year, the club that had been a Champions League semi-finalist was fighting relegation. By 2007, they were in administration. A club that once played among the best teams in Europe was gone from the top of the sport within 5 years, and it wasn't a single transfer that did it. It was a belief, the belief that this season's success would repeat itself forever. Here's why this matters more than any single bad signing. Your brain does the same thing Leeds as board did. Psychologists call it the sunk cost fallacy. The harder you've worked for something, the harder it is to admit it was a mistake. So instead of cutting your losses, you double down. Leeds didn't collapse because one person made one bad call. They collapsed because nobody in the building was willing to say, "We were wrong," while there was still time to fix it. So here's the pattern hiding underneath all of it. Every one of these mistakes felt completely reasonable in the room where it was made. Coutinho looked like a generational talent. Lukaku had the numbers to justify the fee. Chelsea's coaching staff genuinely believed De Bruyne wasn't ready. Leeds board genuinely believed qualification was close to guaranteed. Nobody walked into these decisions trying to lose money. They walked in with confidence, data, and the best information available at the time. That's what makes this different from an on-pitch mistake. A missed penalty is instant. You see it happen. You know immediately what it cost. A boardroom mistake takes years to reveal itself. By the time the number is final, the person who made the call has often already moved on to another club, another job, another decision that will take years to judge. Nobody claps. Nobody boss. The consequences just quietly accumulate in a ledger somewhere, waiting to be added up by someone who wasn't even in the room when it happened. And that's really what separates the clubs that stay at the top from the ones that don't. Not talent, not even money. It's the ability to admit quickly when a decision was wrong, instead of doubling down to protect the ego that made it in the first place. Because in football, the scoreboard tells you who won the match. But it's the balance sheet that tells you who's still standing in 5 years. Most of the time, nobody's watching that number until it's already too late to fix. And the next time you see a club splash £100 million on a player, remember, the real story isn't whether he scores, it's whether anyone in that boardroom is honest enough to admit it